Okay, hopefully this stream is a little bit better. Don't know what was up before. All right, maybe this is better. Who knows? Wow. This is what happens when you're standing on the other side of the camera and you can't see what's going on. You can't see that your video cut out. I'm just standing here talking to myself. No big deal. Fabulous. I don't know what was going on there, but I was talking to myself for 5 minutes while it was saying no video. So maybe I should stay on the other side of the camera, just in case. You know what? I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna go with it. Explains why I couldn't get the live chat to refresh either. That would have been bad. Anyway, all right, guys. Let's try this again. Welcome to the Renaissance Woodworker Live. If you don't know, I'm Shannon Rogers. I run this joint. And tonight, I'm coming to you from the J. Gibson McIlvaine Lumberyard. That's my day job. That's where I spend my days. I'm the director of marketing here. J. Gibson McIlvaine is a wholesale, primarily hardwood dealer. Wow, we've been selling lumber since 1798. Officially, technically, our roots go back as early as 1740. There was this issue with this Revolutionary War thing and then the founding of a country that made it a little bit difficult to incorporate any business prior to when we did. So we've been selling lumber for a very, very long time. And I get questions both in my capacity as director of marketing here and running the Renaissance Woodworker and the Hand Tool School. I get questions about lumber every single day. It's one of the things that we always seem to have more questions about. So tonight, we're going to talk about lumber. And it seems like the perfect place to do it is here at the Lumberyard. So I've got chat rooms up and running. I'm going to do my best to answer any questions I can. Right now, I'm still not getting this live chat to fire up on my tablet. As I stand here in front of the camera, I can't see the chat that's going on my phone. Here we go. Now I can pull it up on my tablet and at least I can see the questions as they come in. The idea is for this entire session to really be driven by you guys and your questions. It is ultimately a Q&A session. So while I'm letting that chat stream initialize, I want to kind of kick things off with some real basic lumber questions. And the reason for this really is, come on. Where's the chat? There's the live chat. Perfect. The reason I want to tackle basic questions is to kind of set the tone tonight. There's really no such thing as a dumb question here. There are a lot of people that have decades of lumber buying experience, but there's just as many, if not more of you that have never bought lumber before, or if you have, you've been kind of relegated to the big box store. Maybe you've been lucky and you bought it at a Woodcraft or a Rockler, but you've never really been to a, quote, real lumber yard. And it can be very intimidating. And I get, horror stories all the time of showing up and being overwhelmed and kind of leaving with not quite what you wanted, or maybe your tail tucked between your legs. So basic questions that I get probably once a day. What's hardwood? That's a good one. This is hardwood. No, hardwoods, botanically speaking, hardwoods are deciduous trees. They're trees that lose their leaves. They have a very definite pore structure, and for the most part, it's the woods that we like working with when we're talking about woodworking and furniture making and things like that. The largest color palette and grain texture and interest comes from hardwoods. Now, that's not to say softwoods are bad, white pine, Douglas fir, southern yellow pine, Alaskan yellow cedar, but they're all kind of in that blonde kind of color frame. Softwoods are, well, they are softer, in some instances, softer than some of the hardwoods. Softwoods are coniferous. They're for the most part, evergreens, the needle trees and things like that. Hemlocks, firs, again, most of your construction lumber, your dimensional lumber, your studs and 2x type stuff that you would buy at Home Depot or Lowe's, that's softwoods. Depending on where you are in the country, it could be southern yellow pine, it could be Douglas fir if you're out west. It's like a hem fir hybrid here in my neck of the woods. Sometimes it's northeastern white pine, but that's becoming rarer because northeastern white pine generally is sold like a hardwood. Yay, confusion. So anyway, these are hardwoods. It's mostly when we're talking about kind of higher quality lumber, even that's a loaded statement. Lumber is all kinds of loaded statements. For the most part, the good stuff, we're talking about hardwoods: cherries, walnut, red oak, white oak, bubinga, zebra wood, choctavice. Pick your favorite species. The next question I get all the time: what the heck is rough sawn lumber? Come here, let me show you. Come with me, I will show you. This is all rough sawn lumber. It's very dusty rough sawn lumber because it's been really windy today. Actually, here's a better shot. Rough sawn lumber, well, it's roughly sawn. It's very rough in texture. You rub your hands over it, you're probably going to get a splinter. Rough sawn lumber, before it was a board, was a log. This is the stuff that comes straight out of the sawmill. In this case, it came out of a bandsaw mill. You can tell by the straight vertical lines across here. Very, very rough, just because a circular sawmill or a bandsaw mill has to have a very low pitch, very few teeth per inch in order to cut aggressively, deep gullets to excavate the sawdust so that you're not cutting forever. So it just ends up being a much, much rougher cut. Take a handsaw that's 5 points per inch and make a cut with it, it's going to leave a rougher surface than a handsaw at 12 points per inch. This is roughly sawn straight from a log. That's rough sawn lumber, and for the most part, rough sawn lumber is sold volumetrically. It's sold by the board foot, which brings up the next question: what the heck is a board foot? A board foot is volume measure. A board foot, in abstract, is a 1-inch thick board that's 12 inches wide and 12 inches long. It's a square foot, 1 inch thick. So it's not a cubic foot. It's important to recognize that. We immediately think volume and think, oh, it's a cubic measure. It is kind of, but not 12 by 12 by 12. It's 12 by 12 by 1. That is a single board foot. Now the problem with that is it gets to be a little difficult to calculate, and you're trying to figure out, okay, I need 100 board feet, and unless you do this a lot, you may not know what the heck 100 board feet looks like. So, for instance, let's look at this pack right here. I would guesstimate probably 1,100 or 1,200 board feet, just based upon, this is kind of how things are packed. I can tell you, booyah, 1,130 board feet. This is red oak. This would be how lumber traditionally was sold, and even today, from a wholesale perspective, this is how it's sold. It's sold in this volume block. Now, the reason we're selling volumetrically and not, say, by the linear foot is because it is rough sawn. Just look at these boards. You know, there's a gap here, there's a couple gaps here, because it's not necessarily, certainly not flat. It's not a smoothly planed surface that's going to mate together like your hand plane or your power planer boards. There's a lot of fuzziness in here because it is rough sawn. Moreover, there's a lot of random widths. Now, we've got all our lumber stacked here anyway, stacked by length. So this is all, what is this? I just said that, and now I've got a random length pack. Look at that. Well, all right, this is all 8 to 11 foot lumber here. So there's some variance in the length. And if you just look at these ends here, 13 by 9, 13 by 10, 12 by 10, 14, 15, they're all a variety of widths. This is what I would call a 12 and wider pack. Yeah, there's some 12 inch in here, 12 by 10, but mostly and wider, since there's 15, 16s, there's a 19 over here somewhere. So there's a wide variety of stuff in here. On most of your random width packs, you're gonna have 6 inch, 4 inch, 8 inch, all that stuff spread all over the place. And if you were to try to say, okay, I need, you know, a bunch of 8 inch wide boards, it's gonna be rare that you're gonna get that. You're gonna end up buying this volumetric pack. And this is where confusion comes in as people come to the lumberyard. You have in your mind, I need X width to build a bed, you know, so you have what you need and you show up and it's like, oh crap, I needed some 6 inch wide boards and look at all this. And more often than not, what happens is you find a pack like this, it's 12 and wider, and you go, ooh, I want some wide boards. And you end up throwing your parts list, your shopping list out the window because it's all just so attractive to buy the nice wide stuff. Board foot, it's important to understand that it's volumetric measure, and you're gonna end up with most lumberyards selling it volumetrically. However, where'd I put that piece? You can also buy surfaced lumber, and I think anybody who's bought at Home Depot or Lowe's, Rockler, Woodcraft, and as I understand it, a lot of the retail lumberyards are now selling surfaced lumber. This is what I would call an S4S. Well, this is an S4S E4E board. I'll get to that in a second. It's S4S, meaning it has been surfaced, it's been planed on 4 sides. So it's nice and smooth. It's a piece of epay here, piece of 2x6 epay. So it's incredibly heavy, by the way. It's been planed on all 4 faces. It is a set dimension. It's a set thickness because it's consistent throughout. It's also an E4E board. You'll notice that the edges are slightly round over. Think of a stud at Home Depot. They're all rounded edges. This is meant to be a decking board or a decking joist of some sort, so it's already got those edges rounded over. This is a finished milled product. That material is sold by the linear foot, because now this is no longer just rough lumber. This is a 2x6. So that has a definite dimension to it. So now you're a matter of choosing the lengths that you need and the number of boards you need at a certain length. So now you're buying it by the linear foot. I know that this 2x6 epay, well, 2x6 epay these days is probably $12 to $13 a linear foot, if not $15 a linear foot. Talk to me in a week, and it's probably going to be 18 or 20. So, you know, this is 2 feet long, and we'll just say it's $12 a linear foot. This is going to be 24 bucks right here, folks. Yeah, epay is not cheap. When you get into 2x epay, it goes up dramatically because it's sawn in much fewer quantities. Most epay is sold in decking thicknesses, 1x and maybe 5/4 or 1 inch thick. Which brings me to my next point. The other question I get all the time, I'll get somebody asking for lumber and I'll say, okay, we've got 4/4, we've got 8/4, 6/4, 12/4, 15/4, 9/4, 16/4, and they go, whoa, 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 whoa. I need 1 inch thick. I'm like, okay, I have 4/4. What the heck is 4/4? So the origins of this story go back a little ways. And if you talk to people who've been selling lumber for 60 years, even they're not exactly sure. But if you look at a log carriage on a sawmill, specifically a vertical oriented sawmill, not a band mill, well, a band mill can run vertically, but the saw blades run in vertically, your carriage slides in and out, and it will set the distance that the width of the board that you create. There are detents along the carriage, little stops, and you move it forward and it stops. That's 1/4 of an inch. You move it forward 2, that's 2/4 of an inch, 3, 4, 5, etc. So if you want to make a 1 inch thick board off the sawmill, you're going to advance it forward to the 4th quarter. Now you have 4/4 lumber. If you want to make a 3 inch wide board, you advance it to the 12th quarter and you have 12/4 lumber. That's the origin, supposedly. Again, I have tried and tried and tried and tried, and I still can find no actual empirical evidence in the historical record. And believe me, we've got lumber records, sawmill records going back into the 18th century, and it's just kind of been this, everybody just assumes this is what it is and still have yet to find actual proof of it. So if anybody out there has actual proof of this or has another theory, there you go. But needless to say, the 4/4, 8/4, 12/4 terminology has persisted to this day. And because, again, let's go back to this stack of lumber. Actually, let's find another stack of lumber. Find something different. Ooh, this will be fun. This lumber is 5/4 material. I hope those birds aren't too loud. Quiet, birds. Stupid sparrows. So, this material is 5/4 lumber. So, this thickness is 1 1/4 inches. But is it really? There's going to be some variance because of the rough sawn nature, because this board may undulate a little bit, may be a little bit fuzzy. Most of our stuff is fat. Most of our stuff is going to be a little bit fat of 1 1/4. Ideally, you're going to get a full 1 1/4 out of this. When you plane it, you're going to end up with something closer to 1 inch. So it's anytime you're hearing 4/4 or 5/4, any quarter terminology, it's an indication that what you're talking about is rough sawn lumber. If you hear somebody that's saying, okay, I need it to be 1x or 2x, that's generally an S4S board or at least an S2S board. And it's probably going to be sold by the linear foot. Now, anybody who's been to Lowe's or Home Depot knows that a 1x is not actually 1 inch thick. It started as a 4/4 board, 1 inch, then it was plain and it's more like 3/4 of an inch, which is even more frustrating. And there was actually a lawsuit recently, and that's why if you go to Lowe's, it'll say 1x6, and then in parentheses below it, it'll say 3/4 by 5 1/2, which is really fun. So anyway, that's the other question I hear all the time is what the heck is with the quarter thing? And that's the surest sign that you're dealing with rough sawn lumber. When somebody tells you they have 4/4 or 8/4 or 12/4 or whatever, it's a rough sawn board. Let's see. Our lumber yards don't use this terminology. Who are you? What was that, Salco? Who is our? Are you talking about European lumber yards? They use metric in that instance. But it also depends upon whether that lumber yard sells mostly surface lumber or rough lumber. A lot of times it will be cubic meters, and it's a whole other different thing, which is real fun. We have to adjust for the region. So yeah, sorry, this is a North American lumber yard. I'm going to use the terms we have here. But when we buy, for instance, this sapele, we're buying it not by the board foot, we're buying it by the cubic meter. And we're also not buying 4/4, we're buying a millimeter dimension. We're buying 25 millimeter, 35 millimeter, et cetera, et cetera. If a rough sawn board, come back. Gary says, if a rough sawn board is 6 3/8 inches wide by 96 by 1 inch thick, first of all, your dimensions are all off there. Thickness by width by length, people. You go to a lumber yard, it's always going to be 4/4 by 6 by 8, 4/4 by 7, whatever. 6 3/8 inch wide, 96 by 1 inch thick. What should you expect for the board foot measurement? So you're going to ask me to do math here. So essentially, we'll do it from a board foot perspective. It's 1 inch thick. Let's say it's a 4/4 board. 6 3/8, I would round up to 7 inches there, and an 8-foot long board. The basic measurement is if a 6 inch wide board is going to be half a board foot for every 12 inches. So we're going to be basically 4 board feet, probably more like 5 board feet for that particular board. I can do the math, but I'm not going to do that right now. I have a video called Demystifying the Lumberyard, where I talk about board footage and quick ways to quickly round it up. If I look at, here's a 5/4 by 8 board. I mean, you could very quickly look at, you're looking at your width and you're taking multiples of 12. 6 is half of 12. 8 is what? That's terrible that 8 is what, 2/3? No, 3/4. Yeah, 2/4. God, I'm out of it. 2/3. You can look at that and quickly, my chat room just cut off, and kind of quickly estimate how many board feet you're going to get out of that. But here's the thing. You need to remember, when you go to a lumber yard, you may have, say, a plan that you've drawn up, and you may have a parts list, and you've calculated, you pulled out your calculator, and you've figured out how many board feet you need. I need 120 board feet. That's really not the whole story. I mean, I guess it could be. If you really don't care like what the grain and color match of your piece looks like, or if you don't have any specific plans for panels that need to be glued up, and I don't want that panel to be 5 boards, I want it to be 2 boards, I don't want to glue up a panel at all. If you don't have any specific plans like that, you can just go and buy 120 board feet of lumber. But more than likely, you've got some very specific ideas. I've got a 20-inch wide top on this table, and I'm probably not going to get 20-inch wide lumber, but I really don't want to have 3 boards. I want to have a single glue line, which means I'm going to need to find 2 boards that are going to net plane out to be 10 inches wide. So in your mind, in your shopping list, you're thinking, okay, I got to go find really 11-inch or probably 12-inch wide board. So yeah, I still need 120 board feet, but I'm going to need to find a board that's going to be 11 inches wide. And this is really where people start to fall apart, is we're told by all the magazines, by the lumber yards, we're selling by the board foot, everything's by the board foot. So know how many board foot you need, what species you need, and what thickness you need. Great, you show up, you say, I need 120 board feet of 4/4 material, you get back to your shop, and you still end up with stuff that either too much, or you end up with stuff that's not going to work. You go back to the lumber yard. It's because it's more than just board feet. When it comes to the pickiness of the average furniture maker or hobbyist, we really get picky about which boards we choose for which things. We want really good color match, which means you probably have to use fewer boards. The more boards you get, the more variance in color is going to be. But if you can get that tabletop out of a single board cut into smaller parts, color and grain match is going to look a lot better. So you got to think beyond the board feet. And I know that sounds contrary because that's how we sell the lumber here. But if you know I need that 12-inch board. You can figure out the math and go, okay, well, I'm gonna need an 8-foot, a 12 by 8 board, 4/4 by 12 by 8-foot board, which is 8 board feet, right? 12 inches wide, 8 feet long. Yeah, so I'm gonna need 8 board feet of 4/4 by 12 lumber. Now, that's a little bit more specific. You can go to a lumberyard and you can tell, I need a total of 120 board feet, but I need a good 8 board feet of 12 by 12 and wider material, 4/4 by 12. You know, so that you can go and pick. If you look at our packs, for the most part, they're sorted by width. They're all sorted by thickness. For the most part, they're sorted by length, and for the most part, they're sorted by width. If they're not all the same width, they're within a range, 6 to 8 inches, 6'8", 6'8", 8 up. A lot of times you'll hear it's 6 to 8 inches with an 8-inch average, 6'8", 6 up, meaning 6 to 8 inch width with a 6-inch average. And again, length is almost, it's not even in the terminology. I call it 4/4 by 6. You know, what length do you need? Well, here's what we have. We have 10 foot, we have 12 foot, you know, and you have to think in terms of multiples, because the other thing where people go wrong is they think, well, you know, oh, here's a 10-foot board. I really only needed 8, but I'll just go ahead and buy the 10-foot because that's what they have. Then you end up with this little offcut. Like you've cut out your parts or anything, and you end up with this like 8-inch offcut. What are you going to do with that? You know, and if you think about it, that's, you know, depending upon the width, you may have either a whole board foot or some fraction of a board foot. And if you just paid $6 a board foot for that cherry, you know, there could be $3, $4 that you have no use for, that's probably going to go in the trash or in the fire pit or sit in your scrap pile for the next 27 years until you figure out that perfect thing to do with it. So, guys, I'm sorry if the audio or the video is bad. I'm working entirely off of the elements around me. There's a storm moving in. There's really nothing I can do. I apologize if you're getting static. I wish I could, but there's not much I can do about it. So anyway, we've got another half hour that I've allocated here. Those are some of the basic questions, and I really would like to answer so many other questions you may have. So let me know. Tom says, I always plan on staying at the hardwood dealer for 4 to 5 hours because of being so picky and all the math. You know, there's something to be said about that, but there's also something to be said about preparing ahead of time. I wrote an article for Popular Woodworking a couple months ago that talks specifically about how to create your lumber shopping list. And it's really important to know these things, to know where do I need to be picky and where can I be okay. You know, the tabletop is always a good example. This is some area where I really want really pretty grain and I want to focus on fewer boards in the glue up. So what you really need to be picky about is picking that one board for that tabletop. But say if there's drawers in that tabletop, the drawer size is probably not that important. Just buy FAS lumber and you'll be okay. Really, proper planning before you actually go to the lumberyard is the best thing you can do to eliminate the time you spent on the lumberyard. Yes, this is a dry kiln. Blast doors I don't think is quite the appropriate term for it, but this dry kiln was actually just emptied, and now we've moved some stuff in here just to keep it out of the rain. We're expecting to get tomorrow. These are our dry kilns. We have 7 of them here on site. Real quick, I don't know very much about Aussie lumberyards, sorry. All over the country they do things a little bit different. So yeah, it makes it a little bit hard to say how the Aussies do it. Some lumberyards in this country do things entirely different. So yeah. Anyway, these are our kilns. We've got 7 of them. Kiln number 5 and number 4 are currently running. They both were loaded just 2 days ago. So they're in the warm-up phase right now. This kiln was just emptied. Let's see, I did the same thing with my apprentice group last Thursday, and this kiln was in cool down at that point. It's now been emptied, and this material is actually just ready to be shipped out. So yeah, it's just here because we're expecting lots and lots of rain tomorrow. Kiln 6 and Kiln 7 are in cool down phases right now. They are about ready to be, probably will be cracking the door. Actually, let's get over there a little closer. If you look, these little doors within the big doors, those will get cracked probably tomorrow or the day after. And that begins to start filtering fresh air in and cooling it down very, very slowly. So there was a whole bunch of questions just came across there. So let me see if I can pull them up. No, I will not climb the stacks. I know the question was a long time ago. All right. Come on. Chat room seems to want to freeze here. Chat room is reloading. Okay. Is the mostly square edge lumber here? Yes, it is mostly square edge lumber here because I'm going to get actually out of the wind. Because we are a wholesaler, mostly who we're selling to are the retail yards that you guys are going to buy from or the contractors and manufacturers. We are not a specialty. We're not a sawmill, first of all. We don't actually saw the lumber here. We have a millwork, which is actually still running. Sorry about the wind. We have a millwork that will produce S4S or molded profiles of the rough sawn lumber we have here, but we're not actually sawing it from logs. I leave that to Matt Cremona. So when we get the lumber, it's already sawn into boards, and for the most part, it's sawn into boards that are common in the commercial sector. So wide lumber is not needed all that much in the commercial sector. Definitely, it's rare to have a lot of needs in the commercial sector above 12 inches. So for the most part, the lumber is in the 6 to 8 inch range. Moreover, the NHLA lumber grading standards say in order to be FAS, which is the top grade, which is a total farce if you ask me, but that's okay. Lumber grading standards were put in place in the 50s. A lot has changed since then. But FAS says that you have to have a board that's at least 6 inches wide by 8 inches or 8 feet long, and it's 83.3% clear. So if that's the top grade, it doesn't behoove any sawmill to get a bunch of wider lumber than that. Really, they're trying to do is meet that standard. So a lot of times, you're gonna find the lumber here is all gonna be square edged. It's gonna be sawn into boards, and it's gonna be in that general range. So 6 and 8 inch is probably the most common. Because we are a specialty lumber yard, we have a lot of species. We deal with a lot of different manufacturers, from boat builders to door and window manufacturers to retail lumber yards to cabinet shops. We do carry a wider range of stuff. So we will have 12 and wider packs, but I would say the lion's share of our material here is gonna be 6, 8 inches wide for the most part. Good question, Dino Studios. Let me get to that in just a second. Aaron, they ship the boards green and then you guys dry it? For the most part. Yes, some of our material does come in already kiln dried. Some of it, if we need really, really quickly. A lot of our poplar comes in already kiln dried, but we also buy a fair amount green. We try to buy green as much as we can because it saves us money and allows us to have more control over the quality of the stuff that comes out. So, man, there's a lot of questions here. There's no way I'm going to get through all these. There was one about kiln drying I saw while I was on that topic. How many steps are there to kiln drying? There are 7.3. No. Lumber comes in, it gets sorted and stacked and stickered. It then goes and lives in the air drying yard, which is the other side of this, whatchamacallit, shed. The lumber will sit in the air dry yard for a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and then from there it is taken and put in our kilns and dried. So it's really not very many steps, but it's graded every step along the way to determine, you know, what kind of material do we have here. Are we going to have to adjust our kiln drying schedule? What, if any, customer spec is this going to meet, etc. So this is the air dry yard. It's actually pretty empty right now because all those kilns have just been loaded. So yeah, that would really be first step. Then from there into kilns. Once it's come out of the kilns, it goes and lives in these sheds. But the building we were just in is the grading chain, where every time the lumber comes out of the kiln, it is then graded, and any kiln defect, any in-checking, things like that is then sawn off. So that is a very weird question, Charlie. I have no idea why you would ask that. So There was a good question. What was that question? I think Aaron had that question. I'm just gonna kind of come out of the wind as much as I can. I don't know what's causing any static on my line here, but if 8-quarter lumber is less labor for lumber yards, fewer cuts, why is its board foot price higher than 4-quarter? Is it kiln time? Well, actually, 8-quarter lumber is not that much more expensive than 4-quarter lumber. If you actually look at the prices, you'll find that the jump is not that high. But it's more expensive per board foot because, yes, it's harder to dry. Most definitely it's harder to dry. But yeah, it's really not that much more expensive. What's actually more expensive is 5-quarter and 6-quarter lumber than 8-quarter lumber because most lumber mills do not saw in that thickness. Those thicknesses are generally a little bit more European grade standards. We are doing a little bit of both. Bob asked if we're using visual grading or machine grading. A little bit of both. We have a vision tally that quickly tallies our lumber as soon as we bring it in. But for the most part, because of the wide variety of the species that we carry, we have to do visual grading. We have kind of an army of graders that do all our stuff. So I've heard you bring a block plane to the lumberyard, take a couple of swipes of the rough wood to see the grain is. I don't know anybody who does that. I hear that all the time from the magazines. I don't think anybody's going to really object to it. You certainly want to ask first. I think you might actually get turned down by quite a few people who say, you want to do what now? Quickly, I mean, you work with enough rough sawn lumber, you can start to get a feel for what the grain and the color is going to look like, especially if the material has had time to oxidize and color. All of this teak is pretty much going to give you an idea of what the color is going to look like after it oxidizes. But it's one of those things where you definitely want to ask before you start planing stuff up. Wow, so many questions. Good question. As a hobbyist, what's the best way to approach a lumber yard you've never been to before? The best way, I feel like I should have a more interesting background here. The best way is to be prepared. You want to know what you're building when you go. And I'm not saying, just go up and impulse buy, because, there are some yards that have like, cutoff bins and things like that, and marked price by the board type bins. But you want to have an idea of what you're building. You want to take your parts list and you want to convert it into a shopping list. And that's kind of reverse engineering from parts into boards. I need X number of drawer sides, I need X number of drawer fronts. So kind of lump those back. Think of those plywood cutting diagrams in the magazines where they stack all the parts together. Obviously, you've got to be a little bit more liberal, or conservative, I should say, because you've got to account for the kerf and all that stuff. But imagine reassembling your parts back into a board and then saying, okay, now I need 3 boards 8 feet long. Have that lumber shopping list in hand, know your thicknesses and your species, and then do a tally, a board foot tally. So I'm going to need 50 board foot of 4-quarter by 6. I'm going to need 20 board foot of 4-quarter by 10. Go to that lumber yard with that list in hand and then just say, look, I'm building a cabinet, a table, whatever. This is what I need. If you go to them with a parts list, no, it's not going to work, because you think about that. This process is called the takeoff. Taking your parts and reverse engineering back to boards and figuring out how much raw material you need can actually be quite time intensive. And a lot of lumberyard guys are not going to do that. Moreover, would you want somebody to do that for you? Think about all the decisions you make about color and grain and number of boards in a panel when you build a project. You want to have control over that. So if you do that takeoff yourself, you know what that shopping list looks like. And now you're handing something that your average lumberyard worker is going to know what it is. They're going to have a good idea. And if you've never been to that yard before, you can call and say, I'm going to need X board feet of 4-quarter cherry. I'm really hoping that you've got some 10-inch boards, but most of the stuff I'm going to need is 6-inch. Do you have that? Oh yeah, plenty of 6-inch. I don't know about the 10-inch, let me check on that. Goes on hold, da, 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 hold music. Okay, yeah, I've got, you know, a couple thousand board feet of 10-inch wide lumber. Totally fine. Great. When can I come by? Do I have some time? Can I maybe pick through some of the stacks? You know, ask them that type of stuff. Or you just show up and ask them that. But if you're prepared, your entire experience is going to go a lot better. Not only will you end up with what you need without massive amounts of waste or having to go back to the yard and buy more, but you're going to end up with just a more pleasant experience. I hear horror stories all the time of, you know, surly lumberyard workers. If you have that shopping list in hand, that surliness quotient went down dramatically from there. So. Got about 15 minutes, and then I probably need to call it because it's going to start getting dark. It's really annoying. This chat room keeps like stopping the questions. Let me come back over here. Let's walk and talk, shall we? What other questions you guys have? If you asked it before, ask it again, because there's a huge chat room and I can't scroll through it all right now. Any particular part of the lumberyard you'd like to see while we're here? Well, we got 15 more minutes or so to talk. By the way, this is plywood. It's mostly marine plywood. Oh, you guys want to see something cool? We just got some of this stuff in today. It's actually now stacked behind a bunch of other things, but check this out. 1.5 inch thick marine grade plywood. Hell yeah. Can't even imagine the weight per panel on that 4x6 sheet of 1.5 good quality plies, all Akume marine grade plywood. It's great. Yes, we handle BS 1088 plywood. Every single piece you see in this room right now is BS 1088 plywood. We sell to some of the finest yacht builders in the world, so yeah. We have no sawmill here. This is not a sawmill. If there was a half-price lumber, would your toenails have to be 1 or 2 inches long? I love the questions you get. It's wonderful. Does a lumberyard like yours ever sell seconds? Yes, absolutely. Seconds are a byproduct of doing business. FAS lumber, if you buy a pack of FAS lumber, let's go look at some of this oak over here. FAS lumber is going to have a percentage of, you're buying based on a percentage. You're not buying, I wish we could buy 100% FAS, but invariably, you're gonna end up with boards that don't quite meet that grade. So depending on the price, depending on who you're buying from, you're buying a certain percentage of that material will be FAS and some of it won't be. FAS, by the way, is first and second. It's the top grade in the NHLA, North American Lumber Association grading standard. So if we assume this white oak is 14, it's 4/4 stuff, so it's about 400 board feet. Oh, it's right here. 372 board feet. This stuff is all FAS, and there will be some boards in here. Now, granted, this has already been graded and stacked, so there's probably quite a bit in here. But there will be pieces. Say we get a customer that needs, what do they say? It's 372 board feet. Say they need 200 board feet, and they need a specific spec or whatever. We'll pick everything out of here to meet that particular spec. And you pass over boards. This board has a knot in the middle. They're not going to like that. This board doesn't quite meet that width spec. They're not going to like that. Then it goes back into the pack. So 200 board feet leave. There's 172 board feet left. It's probably slightly lesser grade. Now imagine we get another customer that needs 500 board feet. So we come and we grab 400 board feet from one pack, and we grab a little bit from this pack, again leaving a couple boards, 10 boards left over that don't quite meet that spec. Over time, you start to accumulate that stuff that doesn't quite meet spec. That spec may be width, maybe length, maybe thickness, maybe a certain grade. I said earlier, FAS is a really kind of a bad judge because so much of the material that we sell in a commercial sector, 8 feet is short. People want 12 foot, 16 foot, and they want 100% clear. I love that term clear. Oh, I want clear lumber. Well, that doesn't mean anything because the top grade says that only 83% of it needs to be clear. And for that matter, there are certain cutting sizes that come out of that grade. So technically you can have an FAS board that's only clear in like a 6-inch wide section by 4 feet long, and it will still meet FAS grade. There may be a knot in the rest of it. It's not 100% clear, but many people want that. And if you've got a millwork house that's running like crown molding, you try to run a crown molding with a knot right in the middle, that's not good. You end up with a lot of tear out, possibly explodes, the knot comes shooting out of the molder, all that fun stuff. But your crown is going to be sold in 12, 14, 15, 20-foot lengths. So in order to meet that spec, you've got to sell a 100% clear board that is 12 feet, 15 feet long. We've got a lot of that stuff here, but you can imagine over time, you end up with this pile of stuff that doesn't quite meet the grade. And that ends up being seconds. We get it all the time. We got a lot of retail lumber yards actually that buy that from us. So sorry guys, those of you who are buying from retail lumber yards, you're probably ending up with seconds. When I first came to work here, I was floored with the quality of the wood. I could not believe how beautiful this wood was. And it's generally because the really good stuff gets picked over by the people who are buying it by the truckload, by the high-end manufacturers who are making doors and windows and $85 million yachts. They're getting all the really good stuff. And actually, just before you get too mad at them, they're getting the stuff that's left over from the luthiers, from the guitar makers, and from the veneer manufacturers, the plywood people. They get the really, really nice stuff. What's left over goes to the boat builders and the door and window makers and the high-end home builders and things like that. And then what's left over is you accumulate a pack, you sell that to the retail lumber yard. And then you get really cheap stuff that's sold to Home Depot. So yeah, that's kind of the pecking order there, how that works out. All right, this chat room on my tablet is just useless. Marketers invented the word clear. You have no idea. Oh, it kills me. Tom, do you sell to hobbyists? Technically we do. We do have some board foot minimums. If we're shipping the lumber to you, it gets really difficult to ship, 100 board feet. For the most part, we say we have a 500 board foot minimum. That's not hard and fast. Your best thing to do is contact me and let me know what you're looking for, but we are not a retail lumber yard. You can't sort through the stacks here. If you look around, there's, well, it's the end of the day, so there's not a lot going on, but in the middle of the day, there's forklifts running everywhere. It's an insurance nightmare. We can't just have people roaming around the yard, so. How do you find a board you like? I don't imagine they want me unstacking all their lumber to find one with grain and color that I like. In a lot of retail lumber yards, that's what happens, Jim. You find a stack of lumber that kind of meets your width and thickness spec, and you just start going through them. The key is you have to restack them. We do have some people who come here and buy lumber that way. Now, generally, they're buying a lot of lumber or they're buying teak and it's very, very expensive, and we let them do that type of stuff. But in some instances, you can learn a lot by looking at the end grain. If you know what kind of figure you're looking for. If you want a central cathedral pattern, you can look at the end grain of that board and you can tell a lot about it. So for instance, let's look at this piece of white oak here. You can see it's a flat sawn board, so there's a little smiley face there. That curve is centered right in the middle of the board, which means the cathedral pattern is going to be nicely centered right down the middle of that board. It's going to be very attractive. Often we call that pattern grade because you've got an equal amount of material on either side of that central cathedral pattern. Come over to, let's find one that doesn't. Okay, here's one over here. The cathedral pattern's a little off center, and you've got some actual rift sawn and quartered material. So you know this face is going to be nice straight grain over here. You're going to have a cathedral that's a little off center. It's going to be kind of tight. And then you're going to have kind of wider lines over on the left side just by looking at the end grain and how that flows. So you can tell a lot. And what you do in this particular instance is you find that pack of lumber and then you kind of subdivide by looking at the end grain and go, okay, I know that these boards over here, they're not going to work, but those look pretty good there. So instead of digging through the whole pack, at least you have a focus digging. You're digging for that one board that's, let's face it, it's always on the bottom. So what does 90-90 mean on walnut? Oh, great question, Tom. 90-10 you mean? 90-10, not 90-90, because 90-90 adds up to 180. 90-10 or 80-20 or whatever, it refers to heartwood. Sapwood is not a defect according to the North American Hardwood Lumber Association. So if you're buying FAS lumber that is 83.3% clear of defects, that does not include your sapwood. I'm heading to the walnut, by the way. So if what we have to do is come up with additional standards that helps us determine how much sapwood is in there, because the grade itself won't tell us that. So when I say I want FAS walnut 9010, it's 90% clear of sapwood, or in other words, 90% heartwood. Brown chocolatey color, 10% creamy sapwood. 80-10 or 80-20, same thing, 80%, 20%. You'll find it in cherry as well, or you'll hear all heart or all red or 80 red, which again is 80% cherry, red brown color, and the rest of it is the creamy sapwood color. So here is walnut. This happens to be a stock of superior grade walnut that we sell to a very, very fancy boat builder. If you happen to have $35 million of spare cash floating around, this would be the people you want to go to buy your next yacht. So this is 100% heartwood walnut. It is also the clearest, most knot-free, straightest, most gorgeous, beautiful stuff I have ever seen. I still don't know how our buyer has been able to do that. Well, I do know. You buy about 300% more than you need, and you call it out to get this. But in this particular instance, you're talking about a very rare commodity. For the most part, there's going to be no indication of how much sapwood. Elliot, yes, that is usually it. It's 100% because they've sawn the sapwood off. Every tree has sapwood. It's just on the edges, and they haven't cut it off in some instances. But we also have a width spec we have to meet. This particular customer cannot use lumber that is narrower than 8 inches. So all of this lumber is 8 and wider, 100% heartwood. It's incredible. Yeah, there's some beautiful, beautiful stuff in here. So yeah, but the lumber industry, like any industry, money talks, people. You can, if you can come in and buy an entire truckload of the highest grade stuff in the world and you can afford the $12 a board foot price, then yeah, that's, there you go. Any idea where hobbyists find short lengths of stuff like 2x8 Ipe? Yeah, what you want to do, Aaron, in an instance of Ipe is a decking lumber. So contact a decking company, a company that installs decks, a deck contractor. They're going to have all kinds of offcuts, and they will buy, like 2x especially, they're going to buy that stuff in long lengths. And generally, we're constantly trying to talk people back on their lengths. They want it as long as they possibly can, and they end up with these random offcuts that are super expensive. When you're talking $15, $16, $20 a linear foot, you know, a 2-foot offcut's expensive stuff. So contact a decking contractor that actually installs decks, and you'll find all kinds of offcuts there. Same thing with big timbers, by the way. If you want like to build a workbench with like 6x6s, contact a timber framer. For a timber framer, short is anything under 12 feet long. So yeah. Jason, the cost on that walnut, I think I just said, is anywhere from $12 a board foot to probably $18 a board foot. But those are wholesale costs. If you tried to buy one board of that, it would probably be a lot more expensive. Any exotic wood in the yard? Yes, 60% of our yard is exotic. We happen to be in the walnut shed. This entire shed from there down is versions of mahogany. African mahogany, genuine mahogany, sapele, and utile. The shed that's the other side of that is nothing but utile. This lumber all here is African Afrormosia. This is African mahogany. This is mostly domestics down there, cherry and maple. This is your oaks. We have an entire shed that's nothing but Ipe on the other side of this building. Yeah, and then we have 4 sheds over there that are nothing but teak. We're probably the, if not the largest importer of teak, we're pretty dang close to the largest importer of teak. So, somebody just said something about Connecticut. We have an office in Connecticut, but I'm in White Marsh, Maryland. So, what's the main market for utile? Basically, people who like red woods. People who used to work with genuine mahogany now work with utile because genuine mahogany has become very expensive. The quality is not nearly what it used to be. In fact, we have for the most part gotten out of that market because we can't guarantee our customers the same width spec. We're starting to bring it in. Well, we've been bringing it in from Fiji for a while, but it's just gotten so expensive with the regulations. And don't get me wrong, CITES regulations are important here because the market is actually starting to recover now in gypsum mahogany. It was CITES listed, what, in 2008, I think? Don't quote me on that, but it's been a while. It's been almost 10 years. And now that market is starting to recover because of that CITES regulation. But people that do like a lot of mahogany work, they're still doing exterior trim or exterior furniture and stuff. They couldn't get a lot of them can afford it. They just raise their prices, but they couldn't get the specs they needed, the width and the thickness and the clear grades that they needed. So they went to East African hardwoods like sapele and Udele. Udele is a direct cousin of sapele. I actually prefer it a little bit over sapele. It's got a little bit more luster and depth. It's not quite as hard, so it's a little less dense, so it kind of soaks up finish a little bit better. For the most part, depending upon the week, it's the same price as Udele or a little cheaper. Sometimes it's actually a little bit more expensive than Udele or than sapele. They are almost an identical species. Where we sell it the most is to door and window manufacturers because you can get really wide quarter sawn Udele boards, very thick Udele boards. Africa loves to saw in the odd quarter sizes, the 7 and 9 quarter sizes, which are great for, like, think about the thickness of an average exterior door. So they love to buy that stuff and they can get it in like super wide widths. Actually, we've got a little time, I think. Yeah, well, technically I've got 1 minute, but let's just walk over to the Udele shed because you think about the material as it comes out of the tree. And you know, if you've got a flat sawn board that's essentially plain sawn through and through, you know, you've got the diameter, the width of that trunk. Well, but then once you start trimming off sapwood, now granted, exotics don't have a lot of sapwood. You think about tropical climes, plenty of water, they just don't have much sapwood in those exotic woods. So once you trim that sapwood off, once you square it up, you've got even less of that tree diameter. So if you end up with an 18-inch, 24-inch wide piece of Udele, that's a pretty big tree. Now imagine you've got a 24-inch wide piece of quarter sawn Udele, which is basically like a third of the width of the tree. And Udele and sapele can be really just mind-boggling. Now, I say that, we just don't have much of that wide stuff here because there's no market for it. People aren't buying that. But it's very common to find it in heavy thicknesses. There's some 12 quarter over here. We've got some 16 quarter up top. Put a little more light in here. 8 quarter, lots and lots of 8 quarter. This is nothing but Udele in the shed. This is anybody who follows my Instagram, this is the shed we just built and it's filled with Udele already. Got a little bit extra space. So yeah, it's a great wood. I love working with it. If you've never heard of Udele, sometimes it's called Sipo. Another great exterior wood. So eucalyptus is great with water, absolutely. There's a lot of different, the question is what is eucalyptus? Eucalyptus is really a genus. There's a lot of different species under the eucalyptus genus, so you have to be careful. What's better for windows, Udele or eucalyptus? How much money do you want to pay? Eucalyptus is cheaper. I think Udele is going to be a lot more stable, but yeah, 6 into 1 1/2 dozen the other. Please show us the scrap bin mentioned in the Wood Talk show. Did I mention a scrap bin? You mean like the dumpster? The dumpster's empty now, so it's not very exciting. There used to be something we called Philippine mahogany, which is terrible, and it's still called Philippine mahogany, Steve, and it's still terrible. Philippine mahogany is a marketing term. There's about 7 different geni, 7 different genuses and 2,500 different species that get lumped under Philippine mahogany. The good stuff from the Philippines is long gone. I'm sorry. The days of the Chris Craft yachts and Philippine mahogany, it's all gone. So anyway, well, folks, I am pretty much out of time here, but obviously this is popular, so I'll do this again in the future. Probably what would make most sense in the future is to have maybe a little bit of focus. This was just kind of free for all. So in the future, we'll focus on certain things, maybe take a couple questions ahead of time and really focus on those because it's just such a broad subject to cover. But I hope we covered some of the fear The biggest fear in lumberyard is not getting what you need or spending too much money, and that can all be alleviated by proper preparation, taking your parts list, reverse engineering it into a shopping list. There's a great article in Popular Woodworking. I'll have to remember what issue it is, but I've done multiple articles on my blog about this. I call it the Plan A, Plan B method. Plan A would be a perfect world. I'll find that 25-inch wide board. Plan B is what happens if I'm not going to do that. And the one thing I'll tell you is learn your lumber grades. Check out my video on demystifying the lumberyard, or check out my blog here at McIlvaine.com. I talk about all the lumber grades. There are minimum sizes that the grades dictate. So if you know that an FAS board has to be 6 inches wide and at least 8 feet long in order to meet the grade, if you're buying FAS lumber, you know, if you call them up and say, do you have FAS cherry? And they say yes, you know no matter what, you're going to end up with a board that's at least 6 inches wide. Now, how much sap is in that board? That's a whole other question. But you can plan your projects. So plan A would be a 20-inch wide board. Plan B, well, I'm going to need 4 boards to make that 20-inch wide piece. 6, 6, 6, and 6. Obviously, that's wider, but you're going to need at least 4 boards, or you're going to need multiple. Say if the top is only 48 inches long, you know, you can get 2 pieces out of an 8-foot board. You're going to need 2 boards of 8-foot long, 6-inch wide lumber in order to glue up that 24 by 48 inch top. So you can go to the lumberyard thinking, in my mind, I need 2 6-inch wide boards that have a good color and grain match. And it makes things so much easier instead of just showing up and going, okay, I need a bunch of board feet. Do that Plan A, Plan B calculation. It will help you so much. And, you know, don't be afraid to ask questions. If you run to a lumberyard and they're really dicks, take your business elsewhere. And I know that's easy for me to say because I've got lumberyards all around me here, but man, everybody here that has a bad lumberyard story is because they showed up unprepared. And I'm sorry, but most of these guys are really, really busy. They don't have time to answer a bunch of questions. More importantly, a lot of lumberyards, they don't know the answers. These guys know the grade. Some of them know the grade. We got a lot of guys that don't need to know the grade. They can calculate board foot like that, but you know, it's widgets to them. They're moving stuff. They don't have the excitement and passion that maybe we have geeking out of our board and the grain. Some of them do, don't get me wrong. But for the most part, they're punching in and punching out. And if you're going to make their day a little bit more difficult, they're going to be a little surly. But if you show up prepared, you'd be surprised how friendly these guys can be. So with that note, I'm going to call it a night. Thanks for coming out, people. And next time I tour my home lumberyard, I'll do that. Absolutely. Katie, good question. Do a search of the wood database, or good statement. The site has lots of good woods and good info. I'm going to be posting a video relatively soon that is a recording from my class in Woodworking in America that uses the wood database a lot. So stay tuned for that. It'll help you a lot determining what woods you want to work with. If you have additional questions, hit me up. Post them in the comments of this video, post them in the comments on my blog that's going to go up later tonight. Send me an email. I'm happy to help, and if it's if it warrants a demonstration, I'm happy to go include it in a video. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for coming out.